All right, well, it's 1 p.m. and I'll call to order the September 7th, 2021 meeting of the Albemarle County Architectural Review Board. This meeting is being held pursuant to and in compliance with Ordinance 20-A16, an ordinance to ensure the continuity of government during the COVID disaster. A quorum is present. Architectural Review Board members present electronically are Fred Missel, Frank Hancock, Chris Henningsen, and myself, Dave Vanderwerf. Frank Stoner may be able to join us by phone, but he's not present currently. Opportunities for public access to this meeting are posted on the county's website at the county calendar. The public has real-time audio-visual access to this meeting over Zoom and real-time audio access over telephone, both as provided in the lawfully posted meeting notice. This meeting is being recorded and will be made available on the county's website. This online meeting is a public record and subject to disclosure under the Freedom of Information Act. For all speakers, when it's your turn to speak, please first state your name for the record. And for everyone participating today, please keep your microphone muted unless you are speaking. Applicants who are making presentations, note that your presentation is limited to a total of 15 minutes, which you can divide among your team members, and Vivian will let us know when the 15 minutes are up. We'll move to disclosures. Do any board members have anything to disclose today?
No, sir.
Yes, I do, Dave. I will need to recuse myself from ARB-2021-94, the Crozet self-storage item.
Thank you, Frank. Chris, any disclosures?
No, I don't have any. Thanks.
Yep, none for me either. Great, well, there are no items on the consent agenda. Vivian, are there any members of the public wishing to comment on items not on the agenda?
Not at this time.
Thank you. Well, we'll move to regular review items. There are 3 today. Chris Taggart and Margaret Malashevsky from the Planning Division of Community Development will be presenting these. The first one is ARB 2021-92, the Albemarle Business Campus Apartments. Margaret, will you make your presentation?
Sure. I'm trying to share my screen. Are you able to see the presentation?
Yes.
Yes, thank you.
Great. Let me make one more change here so I can see what I'm doing. Okay. This is a proposal to construct 5 apartment buildings with associated amenities and site improvements at Old Lynchburg Road, Country Green, and Mountainwood Roads. It's part of a larger Albemarle business campus development for which you've already reviewed a self-storage building and an office building. The parcel on which the apartment buildings would be located is not adjacent to the entrance quarter street. It's set back approximately 380 feet or more, and is located behind other buildings and behind some wooded area. These factors are expected to reduce visibility from the entrance quarter street. The applicant has supplied some images to illustrate the level of visibility. With offsite wooded area remaining in place and the other ABC buildings constructed, the drawings show that only a portion of one building would be visible. As other changes occur further south or west along Old Lynchburg Road, visibility could change in the future. The proposed buildings have a contemporary appearance. Materials proposed for them include fiber cement siding and brick in shades of tan, brown, gray, and black. These colors are compatible with the colors proposed elsewhere in the development. With the colors and materials and the reduced visibility, these designs appear to be appropriate for the entrance quarter. In the staff report, we did note that there are a few landscape and lighting recommendations. There are a few changes to be made. The action required today is to act on the initial site plan. We've recommended approval of that plan, but today you'll also want to provide comments on the architectural design and provide comments for the final site plan submittal. You might also want to discuss whether the final plan should come back to you for review or whether you prefer for that review to be done by staff. And that's what I've got for you today. I'm happy to try to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you very much, Margaret. Frank Hancock, do you have any questions for staff?
I do not. Thanks, Margaret.
Fred?
No, thank you. Thanks, Margaret.
Chris?
No questions for me. Thanks.
Thank you. Also, none for me. Thank you, Margaret, for your presentation. Is there a representative from the applicant?
Ray Gaines here, along with Adrian Strong and Paul Tassel.
Thank you for joining us. The floor is yours.
Just like Margaret said, this is the apartment portion of 3 affiliated projects through the site plan. And with the with each of them trying to play off each other architecturally. If you have any questions, we can answer those.
Thank you. Do any members have questions for the applicant? I guess we'll start, Fred, with you.
I just have a quick question, and I'm not sure, I didn't see this in the materials, I may have missed it, but I know that staff mentioned if the forestation, the greenery goes away between the parcel and the entrance corridor, then it would be clearly visible. Is there any topographic relief in there that would help to prevent it from being visible, or is it all just the trees that are basically the buffer?
From driving the area, I believe that the grade is higher on the parcels between our project area and the entrance corridor.
Okay, so that suggests that there may be some elevation that could potentially help with the visibility, but you're uncertain?
We have site sections. I'm not sure if we're able to show those that were part of our ARB submittal. They do show the grade rising above the behind the current mobile home park. There is some grade difference there.
Are you able to see the plan on my screen? I'm trying to get to the right sheet. Here we go.
Yeah, so that top section is the one cut through that mobile home park portion that shows 5th Street at the far left side. And then the building in orange is one of ours. So you can see how the grade rises a bit in between the two.
Thank you, Fred. Does that address your question, or do you have any follow-up?
Yes, that addresses it. I'm sorry, I was on mute. Can you tell, what is the difference in elevation? Is it like 5 feet, or I can't read those? There we go, first floor. So the elevation of 5th Street might be close to the elevation of the first floor.
Right, it's slightly below that first floor level.
Oh, I got you. Okay, got it. Thank you. Got it. Thanks. Appreciate your walking me through that.
Sure.
Great, Chris.
And the proposed self-storage building is, just to clarify, is that directly between the apartments and the entrance corridor, or to the, okay, all right, thank you. That was all for me.
Thank you, Chris. Frank Hancock.
I don't have any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't have further questions either. Let's see, Vivian, are there any members of the public wishing to comment?
Not at this time.
Thank you. Well, we'll go into discussion. Fred, could you start that off for us?
Sure, happy to. I based on the distance from the entrance corridor and the visibility, and the likelihood that if that parcel that's between the development and the entrance corridor does ever get cleared, more than likely it's also going to be filled with something. So it would probably mitigate the view shed. I don't have any concerns with the requested action based on what I've seen. I think eventually the architecture would become more developed and the landscape architecture would be more refined as it gets further along. But at this point, based on what we're being asked to consider and the images that were shared, I have no other questions or concerns.
Thank you, Fred. Frank?
I agree with Fred. The only thing I would add, I think moving forward, I would be okay with kind of staff level review, just given the distance from the corridor and kind of what we've seen so far with this overall development and then this specific application. The other piece, I think it's a really nice package. I really appreciate the site sections. I think that really gives you a sense and kind of answered a lot of the questions that we would have normally. So nice work.
Thank you, Frank. Chris?
Yeah, I agree. I think the applicant made a convincing case that the development's not going to be all that visible. I think even if it were closer and more visible, the architecture to me is appropriate, and so I don't have any concerns about it either way. I agree with Frank. I think I'd be comfortable with a staff review moving forward on this too.
Great, thank you, Chris. Yeah, I appreciate and agree with what my fellow members have said. I think like Frank and Chris, I would be comfortable with the staff level review. I appreciate the applicants providing the site sections and demonstrating the minimal visibility. And I think for the location relative to the corridor, the architecture is appropriate. So those are my similar thoughts. Why don't we take a look at the motion now?
Are you able to see the Word document?
I am.
Yes.
Great. And Margaret, is there a separate motion or would we need to add to this one staff review?
Let's just add it as a number 6 under the conditions. Any comments?
Hey, Margaret, the only thing, and Dave, the only thing I might recommend is with number 6, we include simple kind of statement as to why that's the case, like due to distance from the entrance corridor, mitigating visibility issue, and appropriate architectural concept drawings, just so that in the future, we're not asked, by someone why.
Right. No, thank you, Fred. I think that's a great suggestion. Yeah, thank you. Any other suggested revisions? If not, is anyone prepared to move?
Sure, I'm happy to move that we forward the recommendations outlined in ARB 2021-92 Albemarle Business Campus Apartment Staff Report to the Agent for Site Review Committee with staff comments as written and the addition of number 6 under regarding final site plan submittal, reading this final site plan may be reviewed by staff due to the distance from the entrance corridor street, mitigating visibility and appropriate architectural concept drawings.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Thank you, Chris. Vivian, will you call the vote?
Yes. Mr. Hancock,
Aye.
Mr. Missile,
Aye.
Mr. Henningsen,
Aye.
and Mr. Vanderwerf.
Aye.
And just to double check, Mr. Stoner is still not with us.
He does not appear to be.
Okay,
No,
thank you.
Could I just add one sort of nitpicky clarifying thing is if I were one of the applicants, I would want to make it clear that although the staff is reviewing it, staff would review it anyway, right? So I don't know if we want to make it clear that if staff determines that it needs to come back because the architectural concepts have changed significantly or fill in the blank, for whatever reason, staff has the right to bring that back to the board.
Thank you, Fred.
For the clarification, Fred.
So I could just add a note to the action saying that following the ARB actions, clarify that staff may bring the final plan back to the ARB if design changes warrant. Is that sufficient?
Yeah, thank you, Margaret, and thank you, Fred. Great, and thank you to the applicant. We'll move on now to the next regular item, ARB 2021-96. Chris, will you make your presentation?
Sure did. The application I'm presenting on today is a final review of the renovation plan submitted for the Mansky Subaru building. Site is located along Route 29 at the intersection with Hilton Heights Road. ARB has approved a number of applications for the site, including 2 special use permits in 2003, ARB applications in 2003 and 2005 for the original building design, and in 2013 for renovation of the Phase 2 building. Condition 1 of the special use permits is that the design of the Phase 2 building shall be compatible with the Phase 1 building, as determined by the ARB. The ARB at the June 7th meeting determined that the design of the Phase 2 building was compatible with the Phase 1 building. The changes to the renovation design since the previous submittal include revising the existing brick along the east elevation north of the tower element to remain unpainted, covering the existing brick along the east elevation between the tower element and canopy structure with ACM panels, and changing the color of the metal coping along the top of the building elevation from blue to metallic silver. Leaving portions of the existing brick unpainted and changing the color of the coping does help to introduce a warmer color and remove some of the trademark nature of the renovation design, but covering the existing brick between the canopy structure and tower element with ACM panels both increase the amount of used in the design and results in the northern portion of the east elevation appearing disconnected from the overall design. Revising the design to keep the brick between the tower element and canopy structure may be one way to establish a more unified building design. Regarding the landscaping for the site, the existing condition on site does not match the previous approved plan. Providing 2 trees and landscaping gaps along Hilton Heights Road, as well as shrubs along the parking areas adjacent to Hilton Heights Road and Route 29 and along the eastern side of the building will help to integrate the site and renovation design into the surrounding context. We provided a list of recommendations in the staff report for continued review. We also recommend that you reconfirm that the design of the phase 2 building is still compatible with the phase 1 building. I'd be happy to try to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Chris. Great. Well, I guess, Chris, do you have any questions?
No, I don't have any questions. Thanks.
Frank?
I don't have any questions. Thanks, Chris.
Fred?
Thanks. I was just trying to pull up, my computer's too slow. I was trying to pull up the site plan amendment, but Chris, at the end of the staff report, there are 2 landscape plans, one for phase 1 and one for phase 2.
Right, yes.
That's what you're referring to that are not included in the site plan?
Or all of the landscaping that was previously approved from those 2 plans aren't, the existing conditions on site do not match.
Got it. Thank you. That makes sense. That's no other questions.
Thank you, Chris. Thanks for your report and presentation. I was trying to recall our main comments from the previous application or submission, and as I recall, there were some concerns about how branded the proposal was, and as I recall, the coping was a branded color. That's been changed. Are there any other key revisions that you'd like to highlight, or that you can highlight for us since the last?
Other key revisions, I would make sure I'm not, okay, make sure I wasn't muted, was as it noted in the staff report, leaving the brick unpainted, and then the addition of the ACM panels. Overall, those are kind of the major changes.
Yeah, thank you. Super. Vivian, sorry, actually, we'll turn now to the applicant for their presentation. Is there a representative for the applicant?
Good afternoon, everybody. Can you hear me? Carolyn, would it be possible to promote Bob Pinio to a panelist? He's actually going to be doing a presentation today.
Done.
Okay. I'm going to turn this over to Bob Pinio and let him respond to the staff comments.
All right, thank you, Kevin. There we are. First of all, I want to thank everybody, Chris and Margaret. Thanks again for all your effort here. Great staff report, easy to follow, and we basically don't really have that much to discuss from our perspective. The 3 major elements of the staff report were the lighting, the landscape, and the use of brick. Lighting, I think we've worked out a path forward with Margaret. We'll be revising that as per her direction, which makes a lot of sense. So we accept that comment. Landscaping, we do accept all the idea behind that and making sure that what was approved was put back into place. As far as the brick massing goes, I think that we're open to a discussion about it. We spent a lot of time trying to understand and playing with it in model form and trying to understand it. Overall, as you know from our presentation, there's a lot going on in the site. There's constriction with where building mass goes. And because of that, relative to a stormwater main, the Subaru requirements, there are kind of these objects that are kind of attached to the main mass. And because of that, the articulation of those masses becomes complex, and it's almost dealing with that complexity is something that we tried to do. And it seems from the last meeting that you didn't have any particular issues with that. So it was an extension of site constriction and also articulating specific program requirements that helped articulate the different types of massing. So we tried the idea of mixing the brick back in because the building form is so articulated, and there are a number of different masses. We thought by including the brick, it started to muddle the idea of clarity. So we decided not to include, and it was a relatively small amount of brick anyway. And this, I'm referring back to obviously the staff's recommendations. We spent a lot of time, and I think Dave, I was reviewing our last presentation, and you had a really smart comment about the difference between using metal panels as punched openings relative to almost structural panels that had a lot more to do with the actual movement of the facade and articulation of the openings. So we kind of went more into the idea of articulating the panels in a very discreet and elegant way relative to openings, spent a lot of time trying to compose those. So we went in that direction. Willing to talk about it. I don't think that we're so hinged on the idea that there wouldn't be this inclusion of brick, but we felt in the end that because there's so many massing movements, it was better to clarify elements. And there's also this partie idea of the back of house and front of house, which corresponds to that elevational change as well. So brick is kind of back of house. We have, basic 3 elevations that indicate use and indicate how the building is composed and how it's used. So again, that was another reason why we stuck with that. And besides that, I don't think that we have open to discussions, and hopefully we've met the outlying questions that were brought up last time. Kevin, unless you have something that you want to bring up to help clarify that, I think we'd be open to the discussion, responding to it as best we could.
I'll jump in with just one final point, which is the existing landscape that's on the site is very robust, and there's a robust amount of landscape on that hillside as well, which kind of reinforces the idea of this background building, which is the brick side, the service side of the Subaru structure really becomes screened heavily from the entrance corridor. And so the energy that was to interject this new renovation happens primarily at the view shed from the entrance corridor, which is the corner of the Route 29 entrance and Hilton Heights Road. So that's our primary view shed, and therefore that's kind of the primary area of emphasis in allowing that brick to be a background building. So that's all I had to add. We look forward to the discussion.
Thank you, Bob and Kevin. Let's see, Fred, would you have any questions for the applicant?
No questions, just appreciate you're looking at the elevation and recessing the Umansky drive aisle a little bit to help offset that. I think that really helps. It's a little thing, but it really helps. Thank you. Looks great.
Thanks, Fred.
Yeah, thank you, Frank.
I don't have any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Chris?
No questions for me. Thank you.
Thank you. Similarly, no questions. Appreciate the development and the expression of the metal facade that you described, Bob. Great. Vivian, are there any members of the public wishing to comment?
Not at this time.
Thank you. Well, we'll go into discussion now. I guess, Frank, could you kick that off for us?
Sure. I think it, achieves what we discussed at the last meeting. I think those 2 moves, leaving the existing brick unpainted on that end of the building, changing the coping color, I think really really successful. I think it's a nice connection to the phase one red brick along the corridor. So I know it's a great package. I feel like there are no surprises with all the visualization. You can kind of see it from every angle. And I would agree that the landscaping is pretty robust, which I think helps. But no, I think it's entirely appropriate.
Thank you, Frank. Chris?
Yeah, I agree. It was a great presentation. I think changing the coping color really helped reduce that kind of branding appearance. I do tend to agree with staff that leaving the brick unpainted, in my opinion, does kind of create a little bit of a disjointed appearance. I thought the previous version where the brick was painted gave the building a little bit more internal consistency than it has with the unpainted brick. And I know that move was made to kind of satisfy comments that were made during the last discussion, but I think the overall result, just to me, is that it makes it look a little bit more like something was just not done on the existing building. And I think the painted brick kind of wraps it up into a more consistent whole, even though, you know, we're losing that red brick. But that's just my opinion. I think it helped previously to have it painted, just in terms of the appearance of the building itself. But that's my only comment. I think it's appropriate either way.
Thank you, Chris. Fred?
Thanks, Dave. I don't have really anything to add. I agree with my colleagues that it's appropriate. I think it's a great reuse of an existing building and fully support it moving forward.
Great, thank you, Fred. Yeah, I agree with my colleagues that it's a nicely developed building. I think the changes, subtle though they are since the last time, have made it more coherent. I think I agree with Chris that perhaps the painted brick would be still more coherent internally for the building, but also quite happy with the current result for the connection to the phase one, to the north. But as always, appreciate Bob and Kevin, your team's presentations and visualizations. Why don't we take a look now at the staff recommendations?
In the staff report, the comments were being offered as recommendations for additional changes, but it sounds like the board members are pretty happy with the design at this point. So we have a motion here if that's the way you'd like to go.
Great, thank you, Margaret. So from the discussion, I guess item one could be deleted. Let's see, Frank, you commented about the landscape. Does item 3 need a revision or deletion?
I think we keep that. I think the applicant is willing to revise the plan to address this comment.
And I know the applicant referred to working on item 2. Same for item 4 for you, Frank?
Yes.
Okay, and also 5, of course. And
need to retain the robustness of that landscape buffer.
Sounds good. Great. Any other proposed revisions for members?
None for me.
Great. Is there a motion?
I'll move for approval of the certificate of appropriateness for ARB 2021-96 Mansky Subaru building renovation with conditions listed in the staff report, amended as follows: strike item number 1, and that's it.
Thank you, Frank. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Thank you, Chris. Margaret, will you call the vote?
Yes. Mr. Missile,
Aye.
Mr. Hancock, Mr. Henson,
Aye.
and Mr. Vanderwerf.
Aye. Great. Thank you, everyone. All right, we'll move on to the last regular business item, ARB 2021-94 Crozet self-storage.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Margaret, will you make your presentation?
Yes, let me get this open and share. Are you able to see the PowerPoint? Great. Okay.
Yes.
This is a conceptual review of a proposal to construct a self-storage facility with associated site improvements. It's located at the northeast corner of the intersection of Route 250 West and Route 240 Crozet Avenue. The existing site is occupied by a convenience store and fuel pump canopy, some additional commercial buildings, and some residential buildings. The proposed building would be 3 stories tall with a 30,000 square foot footprint. And the building shown on this plan measures 250 feet by 120 feet. The applicant has submitted 3 different conceptual designs for consideration. Each design uses brick as a primary material, which establishes a minimal connection to the historic architecture of the area. And each design addresses blankness with architectural details, windows, and material changes. The primary concern, as outlined in the staff report, is the scale of the building, given the character of the surrounding area. The building scale is significantly larger than the existing buildings located nearby. It's expected that the scale will not contribute to unity and coherence along the corridor. In the staff report, we've also noted that the stormwater facility and the dumpster are located very close to the entrance corridor street, where it may be difficult to fully integrate them into the landscape. And finally, we noted in the report that street trees are provided consistently along the corridors, but we wonder if a less formal and more irregular arrangement of trees would be more appropriate here given the character of the surroundings. We've listed a number of recommendations on the plan in the staff report, and this is a conceptual level review, so the action is to provide comments for the next submittal. Be happy to try to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Margaret. Chris, do you have any questions?
I do not have any questions. Thanks for the report.
Right, Frank? Oh, that's right. Sorry, Frank is recused from this one, correct? Fred, any questions?
Thanks, Nate. I know this is outside of our purview, but I'm assuming that the zoning allows for the density that's being requested.
Right.
Okay. I think that's the only, so there were no renderings that showed this from the street view, right? That it was just examples of our different architectural styles and a site plan.
That's right.
Okay. Just want to make sure I wasn't missing something. That's great. Thank you. Nothing else.
I don't believe I have any questions, Margaret. Thank you for your presentation. And would like to invite the applicant to make their presentation at this time.
Hey, thank you for having us today. I'm Andrew Lewis with Merchants Retail Partners, part of the Protective Life Insurance Company, and we're here in Birmingham, Alabama, and really appreciate you taking a look at this with us. Just want to say that this presentation we've given is really just the very beginning of our design process, and we wanted to go ahead and solicit some feedback early so that we could hopefully make a high quality submission when we're ready to go forward. So that's really, I would like to just kind of keep that in mind today in relation to the comments and the materials presented. So I did put together a slide deck that just kind of talked about the use and why we chose this site. It really kind of boils down to the zoning, and then that it's just a nice, quiet, passive use and is appropriate for this site when you consider the surrounding neighborhoods to the rear. And if you were to compare this use to another like retail or high density residential type use that would be allowed in this zoning, you'd really want to look at those impacts. And we're a very low impact development. We don't generate very much traffic at all. Would be less than what's there today. We only require a handful of parking spaces. We don't have a lot of visual impact in terms of light or noise or anything like that. It's a very quiet use, almost acts like a buffer from the neighborhood residents to the rear of us. And we would have a very secure place with 24-hour security, so you wouldn't have to worry about late night activities and things like that that are sometimes can be a problem for a more high density retail type establishment. And then lastly, very low water and sewer as well. So I just wanted to highlight those as just kind of being benefits of our use on the parcel, although we're zoned correctly. Just wanted to kind of mention that. So also wanted to let you know that we're really excited about being in this community, and we plan to build a first-class product here. It may or may not be like anything you've seen from self-storage. Your visual, your vision of your own vision of self-storage might be a single story with the roll-up doors that can look more industrial. These actually look more like an office building or something of that nature. We do a really good job and hire the right design team to help find ways to make them fit into a site like this. So we are planning to build that kind of product here and recognize the importance of presenting that to the entrance corridor along 250 and Crozet Avenue. So with that, we just kind of took a quick look at the surrounding architecture in Crozet and tried to develop a talking point, if you will, with these examples we've given you. One is one that you've approved in your county recently, not to say that's appropriate here or not, just as a talking point really. And then the other two designs are just other projects that have been built that seem to be kind of like what might work here. So again, just want to reiterate the preliminary nature of what we submitted, and appreciate the feedback we've gotten and look forward to talking through the comments. I kind of quickly introduce my design team too. With us, we have Clint Shufflett with Timmons Group and Valerie Long with Williams Mullins. Clint, maybe you could touch on the physical site and some of the stuff we've done with Albemarle County on the planning side.
Sure, as soon as I unmute there. Yeah, like Andrew mentioned, I'm Clint Shufflett with Timmons Group. We're helping out with the site design side of things. Looking through the staff comments, from a site perspective, the comments we received were all pretty straightforward. And I think that we can achieve, a good result in some revisions to meet those comments and concerns. A particular note, the dumpster item that you guys mentioned up against 250, looking at the site grading and the site layout a little closer, I think we can flip that to the back of the site. The grades are going to be such that there's probably a small retaining wall on the back end of the site adjacent to the residential units. So we think that will help to provide screening from the folks, from the residential lots on the backside of the site, to help minimize an impact to them, while also taking that impact away from 250. So I think that can be achieved, relatively easy on our end. Of course, for the landscape comments, we'll come back to the table with a more robust design of the stormwater management facility and some more detail given on the street trees and the plantings for the stormwater management facility as well. As Andrew mentioned, we were just kind of getting in with kind of a high level concept to get the ball rolling and the conversation going. But we'll fine tune the landscape design here moving forward.
Thank you. And Valerie, if you don't mind, would you provide a little context on zoning and entrance corridors and such?
Sure. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Valerie Long with Williams Mullen. And Fred, I was glad you asked this question about the zoning. And I'll just reiterate some of that. The property is zoned highway commercial. It is located on the edge of the development area in the Crozet area. The parcels surrounding it are largely zoned residential. And then the parcels on the south side of Route 250 or Rockfish Gap Turnpike are all outside the designated development area, but they've all pretty much developed with residential single-family homes there. Particularly right across the street, just in the last year or so, there's been a recent subdivision and some new homes constructed. So again, as Andrew said, this I think does serve to function somewhat as a buffer between the growth area and the development or the rural area. It is consistent with the zoning, but as Andrew mentioned, there's not really any impacts from a land use perspective in terms of traffic, noise, et cetera. I think probably traffic would be the biggest concern at this location. There's a lot of by right uses that could be allowed that might have a smaller scale, for example, but would potentially create some significant traffic impacts along this corridor, especially during the peak hour with the schools down to the west, where there's some pretty significant impacts and some delays on Miller School Road as well right now at that intersection. So we thought it was a good use that's consistent with the zoning. It's also consistent with the Crozet master plan designation for commercial use, but without creating those impacts that I mentioned. So, and as Andrew said, we're looking forward to some feedback on sort of, design ideas and so forth that Andrew and his architecture team can take back and work to find a good design that can be a strong submittal. Thank you.
Thank you. And with that, we would love to just kind of maybe at a high level review some of the feedback we've received and talk through it, or just how does the normal meeting flow go from here, I guess is a question.
Yeah, I think we could easily sort of shift this into sort of a discussion work session. I think that's sort of the dialogue it sounds like y'all are looking for. So perhaps you could pull up the different precedent buildings you shared in the submission, and might just invite members. We could go into sort of question and comment period and make this sort of a work session if that works for everybody.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thank you. So I'll share my screen. Are you seeing the slide deck?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
You're good.
So I'll just start at the top and roll through it. So just kind of reiterating what was already said, we're a passive operation, low impact development. We have very few renters per day, 6 to 8. So not much traffic, not much parking. We won't have, your typical other types of things associated with the retail use or a restaurant. There's no drive-through or rowdy customers or alcohol or anything like that. I don't know if I should go too much into the whole drivers for why self-storage is needed, but if you're interested, these are some reasons and things that we've put together to kind of demonstrate why you might see this in your community, as well as just sort of an argument for why this is the best use of this property. We do believe it's complementary, and we do believe that it helps kind of give a gateway approach into the Crozet area if designed appropriately. So again, it kind of solves a lot of problems that you have there with that particular corner. This next slide is just simply a comparison of, you know, retail residential use versus a generic self-storage use, just to discuss some of the things I already covered. You got the aerial photography of the site here with the residences around the north and on the eastern side, as well as potentially a rezoned commercial site, but on the west as well. Brownsville Road surrounds the site and is also the property line. Today, there's a gas station with a small office building and 2 residents on the site. These are the views, eastbound, westbound, looking down Rockfish Gap or Highway 250. You can see the gas station canopy there and a piece of the gas station as well. And then looking from the other direction, you see the small office, little red building down there on the westbound view. Looking northbound and southbound, the northbound photograph is sitting in the intersection of Crozet Avenue and Rockfish, looking down Crozet back towards town. It's pretty heavily screened there with some brush and kind of ivy type vegetation with some trees. And then when you're standing at Brownsville Road and Crozet, looking south back towards the intersection of Rockfish and Crozet Avenue, it's very much the same. This is the survey and topo. The only thing I'd like to point out here is that there's, you know, a fair amount of relief on this site from north to south. So Brownsville Road is elevated above Rockfish Gap or Highway 250. And so that enables us to design the building to kind of hide it more into the topography, which is what we're proposing. This is straight from the Albemarle County GIS information regarding zoning and where the entrance corridors are designated by the stars. And some of the slope features are shown here too. This is our layout. So we've kind of attempted to push the building as far as possible up on the corner of Crozet and Rockfish to really adhere to the code there, to kind of give a more of a building massing on the corners is required, and the minimum and maximum setbacks there are something we'll adhere to, and then put the parking kind of off to the side there to kind of screen it. As Clint mentioned, we can flip the dumpster pad up to the top there to hide that more, and as well as hide it from the residences behind the changing grade there, which is this demonstrates the changing grade. The northern edge of the building is going to be a 2-story appearance from the north from Brownsville, and the southern edge of the building is going to be a 3-story appearance, or a 3-story building rather, with a foundation wall in here along that northern edge. So let's get to architecture. These are just some shots of existing buildings in Crozet that we just thought might be something to look to kind of grab elements or pieces of. This one in the top left corner is the buildings together that, there's that small restaurant bar that everybody's probably familiar with right there. Valerie, what was the name of that one?
It's far down as the restaurant you're referring to. This is the area they call the Square in downtown Crozet.
Thank you.
I think they're pretty familiar with it because they've looked at a lot of projects in the area.
Right. And so the sort of chamfered off edge of the corner there, you know, the 45-degree angle of that building, the darker brick one, is something we kind of thought, all right, that might be something to mimic. This is the depot train station. Really, there's no way the building will ever look like a depot train station, obviously. It just really is more like a way to kind of demonstrate a historic architectural building in the area, using brick as the primary element. And then bottom left is the library and with the mixed use retail in the front using some brick and stone. And then the final picture there is this is called Piedmont Place, a newer development. You're all probably very familiar with this. These are not necessarily things we want to build. Like, we just thought these would be good placeholders for a conversation. And then as far as like a proposed building style, this is just a style that we have designed in the past. We felt like it could work here, or maybe at least elements of this building could work here. And then this one is another building that's existing that has more of a apex, kind of roof line with a large front element on the corner. I'm not sure this is appropriate here or not, but again, just kind of showing you how these buildings can be designed. And then this one you're familiar with is the one I mentioned before that is approved to be built in Charlottesville. So with that, I really just kind of was hoping, like you mentioned, we'd have a sort of free form, maybe work session, if you will, and just kind of hear your feedback.
Certainly, yeah. Thank you very much, Andrew, for going through that. I think, why don't we just go sort of around the circle, and I'll invite members to offer any questions and also share any comments they may have. Why don't we start, Fred, with you?
Thank you, Dade. Thanks, Andrew, Clint, Valerie. You guys have done a really thoughtful job of putting together images, and really appreciate your opportunity to be able to kind of have a work session with you. I will say that you probably picked one of the most challenging structures to put at an intersection that is kind of a mini gateway to Crozet and to this area. Maybe I think it is that because I oftentimes come in from the road that's opposite into Crozet. So for me, it is sort of a gateway past 250. I have a bunch of comments, and I'll just kind of throw them out there if you'll allow me to. And these are just, I'm not sure how well organized they are, but number one, it's a gateway building. So what does that actually mean? And do we all agree that that in fact is what it is? So I think something we can't disagree on is the fact that it is a four-way intersection, and that you need to figure out somehow how to address that intersection with the building, in my opinion, and how to do that appropriately. And you used the example of Mud House and that really kind of cool chamfered edge that is at that intersection. And I've always loved that entrance because it's addresses both sides of the street. It is the central entrance, as a pedestrian, that's where you walk in. It's got great detailing. It's super visible. For all those reasons, it works. If you're going to, again, all this is sort of, I guess, maybe hedging a little bit dangerously towards the side of opinions, but trying not to. If you're going to have that chamfered corner, just thinking about how that is different and special and programmed and utilized for this building. And if that does in fact become an entrance, then does that really make sense with where your parking has to go? The square, the Crozet Square that Valerie mentioned, the great architectural benefit of that is that it's two buildings. It breaks down the scale. It's very well detailed. There are a lot of things on it that this would have a challenge recreating, and I wouldn't necessarily recommend you try to recreate it. You mentioned hiding the topo, the fact that there was some relief. It looks to me like unless I was reading it wrong. I don't see how it's, when you said relief, I thought you meant that it was sort of like recessed into the ground a bit. And I was trying to pick that up, but it looks to me like the ground slopes up in the back corner, right? So the corner that's facing the road, Rockfish and Crozet Avenue, that's the tallest, is that right? So that's the tallest elevation. So I would imagine,
Yes.
I was thinking that it would be flipped where you'd have the benefit of recessing it along the street edge and then having it build up, as you move away from the street to sort of help with that kind of towering feeling. You also mentioned in your summary that it was a maximum utilization of the parcel, which is not necessarily a great thing when you're thinking about scale and pedestrian and the appropriateness. I get it as a developer, that's what you want to have. But I would encourage you to think about landscape buffering, what that looks like, how best to do that. Is there room for you to push the building a little bit further back from Rockfish Gap Turnpike and actually still allow yourself to be able to get the square footage that you're looking for? One of the reoccurring themes over the years in these kinds of buildings is false windows and how you deal with that. And, it's also stair towers or I don't know if tower is the right word in this case, but stairwells anyway. How you deal with that from a visibility standpoint. You had one example in one of your, on the upper right, it was an example where it was sort of just a tan background, like a false window with a tan background. I think window transparency is something that's going to need to be really taken a look at and addressed, as well as lighting at night. There's this image, thank you, it's great timing. This image shows sort of a higher, sort of a higher mass on the corner. And that might be a way to think about this. But again, usually when you do that, we've dealt with this on other buildings, that marks entrance. So I think that'll be something you have to think through. I'm almost done. I was looking at Google Earth and kind of going a little bit further, I guess it's east, and thinking about Harris Teeter. I mean, Harris Teeter is very low relative to this. It's much less of a mass, but the actual building facade is pretty simple. Not saying that's a great example of what you should do, but opposite that on the other side is a much more residential scale. But thinking about that as a precedent, I mean, it was approved in this county, so it's something to think about. And that is the only last thing I'll mention is just thinking about circulation around the building for pedestrians and how they interact with the edge of the building along the roadways. Thanks for listening. That's all I have.
Yeah, thank you, Fred. I really appreciate those thorough comments. Let's see, Chris.
I guess, based on the staff report and just my own experience, driving through that area, to me, the big concern is the just overall mass and scale of the proposed building, combined with its proximity to the entrance corridor. And as alluded to, that's really dictated by the zoning. So it's, in my opinion, not ours to really have any control over that mass and size and proximity. So I think it's more about, from our perspective, how that mass is handled. And I think it would help if strategies were used to break up that mass and maybe try and get this very large, tall building for the area broken down into maybe component parts that have a scale more in line with the residential and even commercial development that's further down Crozet Avenue. And I think that can be done. I think right next to the Harris Teeter that Fred was talking about is a big box, the Cardinal Home Center, formerly Blue Ridge Builder Supply. And I think, that's literally just a box. This proposed building is even bigger. So I think something that would break up that large mass and give it a little bit more interest, I think would be better received in this location. That's all I have.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chris and Fred. Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly with what you've offered. Fred, I think you started with the question of gateway building. I'd certainly agree with your suggestion that this is a gateway to Crozet and the county, and would echo the importance you placed on figuring out a suitable way to address that prominent intersection. I think, Chris, yeah, I agree that the mass and scale of this, though permitted by zoning, is definitely something that is out of the established character of the area. I think I would encourage the applicant, the majority, there's photos of the square, almost everything in Crozet is 2 stories or lower. And so this building at 3 stories is a full story higher than almost anything else there. So anything that can be done to minimize the height and the volume of the building and to give it a sense of a 2-story scale over some large percentage of its facades, I think would be helpful. I think, as Chris highlighted, I think the square, also there are sort of lengths of facade that are common in Crozet that are typically much shorter than this building. So if it's possible to make one building look like 3 or even 5 in terms of its massing, I think that may help to at least make it feel like it's more of the fabric of the surrounding area. Appreciate, Fred, you mentioning Harris Teeter, and then I think it's called Clover Lawn Village across the way. I think that is an example of a building that it's, albeit 2 stories, but might be a useful precedent to look at for how to sort of articulate scale. Certainly appreciate the suggestion of using brick and stone, and there is a nice variety of materials throughout Crozet. I think in our recent survey of the area, we've identified that in many ways the area has a pretty rural character, and this portion of the 250 corridor is starting to head toward the western part of the county where it becomes more rural. So, brick, stone, siding, stucco, others, some diversity of materials may be another way further to break up the facades. And appreciate Chris and Fred highlighting the question of setback. Certainly, if there is a chance to create any more relief to the entrance corridors, I think that might allow perhaps both more robust landscaping and also potentially if there are any opportunities for layering devices such as porches or trellises or other things to break up the facade, that might be also in keeping with and appropriate for other expressions in the area. But that said, I appreciate very much the presentation and the materials that the applicant has brought, and this opportunity to begin the discussion about how to make this a good contributor to the corridors.
Dave, could I add one thing?
Sure, yeah, Fred.
Just from the standpoint of the applicant, I think you've already done this, but if you focus on the design guidelines and you focus on page 11, there's a lot of things under the structural design that when you come back with your work, you will, at least in my opinion, I'd like to hear you say, this is how it achieves an appropriate scale that relates to the site. And then you explain it and, those types of things. I think there's one on there, window glass should not be heavily tinted. Again, things like that are areas you'll have to kind of focus on, but I'd recommend you spend some time looking at that especially. And then one thing, I think, Chris, if I'm not mistaken, the Cardinal Home Center is pre-architectural review guidelines, just to be clear. So
Yeah, I'm assuming so. Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you for that feedback. I really appreciate it. This helps us a great deal. And I guess, kind of at least gets us going in a direction. And maybe just kind of thinking through next steps and how to most effectively achieve the goals that you guys are looking for and that we're trying to achieve too. are there ways for us to communicate in a less formal nature, just kind of as we keep throwing ideas together and thinking on ways to address the comments, specifically the, breaking up the size and scale is the big one. How can we maybe sort of directly more, less formally involve the board in our thoughts? Is there a way to do that, or?
I believe the most readily available format is a work session. Typically, those can be scheduled fairly quickly. We can continue this sort of informal dialogue without having an actual action or staff review required.
Okay.
Other applicants also sometimes will develop proposals and then meet individually with board members, although I think there's a benefit to the work session because it allows probably for a better consensus of and conversation of opinion.
Great.
Fred,
Then we will seek to do that. I think we'll kind of maybe take this a step further and find some examples, some photographs, and maybe some renderings from our deck of examples that might be a little more suited to what I'm hearing you guys ask for today, and flip that back. And then from there, we're definitely going to do a full rendering, sections, and complete plans and all that. But I think we could do that more efficiently and more effectively if we kind of come to a conclusion on what the board thinks is appropriate for the gateway building here before we haul off and do that level of design detail.
Yeah, Andrew, if I could add to Dave's great ideas. First of all, you have an incredibly experienced staff in Margaret and Chris, who have been in, Margaret, we worked together for like 25 years or something. So, we know, Margaret knows the area. So I think, what have you seen, what's been successful, what hasn't been successful? Not to put Margaret on the spot, but I think that'd be great background and information to get. The second thing is, I would say, and I'm sure you're doing this, first of all, in Valerie, you've got one of the best land use attorneys here. And I would say, she also knows the sites, but also if you can't come to Charlottesville and take photographs of precedent images here, for me personally, one of the things that goes the furthest is to be able to say, hey, this was approved in 2016 as a way to mitigate scale, and it was very successful in Albemarle County. We'd like to do that. Here's how we're replicating it, or here's how we're, utilizing that design tactic on our building. And then the third thing I'd say is, yeah, absolutely. Don't get too far down the road, spending a lot of money and wishing you hadn't, I think you're wise to take that one step at a time.
Right, money and time, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So thank you for that. I've been to your market there and your town a couple of times. So but I will look for ways that, and I'll work with Margaret too. By the way, we had an informal Zoom with Margaret with another version of slides that were way across the board that she helped us kind of, not to say she directed us any kind of way. I'm just saying she helped us kind of facilitate what we're looking at. And then we can continue to work with Margaret sort of to help us get maybe another work session scheduled when it's appropriate, after we've had a little more time to try to digest these comments and figure out a way to look for like a precedent of something that was done there in your community before of how to break up the scale. So maybe that's really the next step for us, I guess.
Sounds good. I see that Valerie has her hand raised as well, if you have a comment.
Thank you. I just had a few other questions, if I may, and these are things I probably should have mentioned when I spoke for a couple minutes. One of the issues we struggled with was, frankly, how close to have the building to Route 250 versus not, and knowing that typically in the development area, you prefer the buildings up close to the road, frame the streetscape, et cetera. But for the reasons you all said, we recognized that, one, we needed to have more than enough room in between for appropriate amounts of plantings, but also that it wouldn't, in this location, be appropriate to have the building right up against the road. So we were trying to find that happy medium, but at the same time, knowing that there's residentially zoned land behind the site, trying to find the balance. We didn't want to overwhelm those residential lots with 3 stories on that side. So that was part of the balancing effort that we tried to meet. And so to the extent there's any more feedback on that, I totally get, I can't remember which one of you said, it might be better to flip the building and have the short side on 250 and the taller side on behind, which frankly was my original suggestion. But then I also appreciate the merits of having the shorter side adjacent to Brownsville and those residentially zoned lots. So that was, I just wanted you to know that was part of our struggle, and if anybody else has any specific feedback on that. But also, because there were some comments about building height and other buildings in the area, we also looked at that. And I just want to mention that obviously this area is zoned highway commercial, and downtown Crozet, as you all I believe know, has the downtown Crozet district zoning, which although most of the buildings there are shorter, most of them haven't redeveloped yet. In the zoning regulations for the DCD district actually have a minimum building height of 2 stories. You need a special use permit if you only want to be 1 story. And it has a maximum building height of 4 stories by right and up to 6 by special use permit. So again, we recognize there's different zoning. Highway commercial, you could actually go to 65 feet. We were trying to find the balance there and recognizing, okay, it's taller than other uses in the immediate area, but perhaps as downtown Crozet hopefully redevelops in the coming years, it won't be out of scale with buildings there. Piedmont Place being a good example, although that one's built on a slope. So I don't know how many floors that's considered to be. But anyway, I just wanted you all to know that we have thought about those issues and will obviously continue to do so in working with the architecture team on site. Thank you.
Thanks, Valerie.
Thank you. Great. I don't know, Fred, I think you mentioned, and I echoed the question of citing. Anything you would add to that in response to the question?
Sorry, Dave, the question of what? I missed that.
Citing relative to the
Citing.
resident.
Only the only thing that comes to mind, when I look at the precedent images and think about it, the library, for example, the building on the bottom right, I can't remember the name of that one, and then the building on the upper left, they all have at the street edge where you are walking as a pedestrian a different material and articulation and a real clear kind of separation between first and second, third, fourth floors. I think if you're going to remain close to the roads, you need to address that pedestrian scale with a really clearly defined landscape and first floor building at a minimum. A couple of the precedent images that you also shared, the proposed architectural styles, 2 of them kind of do that. 1 of them kind of doesn't, but I think that's an area that really needs to have some of your focus. So I'm okay with it being close to the road as long as a pedestrian, you don't feel like you're walking by this, this towering edifice. And maybe there's a simple step back that could occur after the first floor or something that gives it some articulation.
Thank you, Fred.
So another thought we had, just don't get upset, was having more like a round tower element on that corner, and instead of doing the chamfer edge, which I think is not what we're looking for, in your opinion, would not really address that concern. Is that just a fair statement? Just trying to characterize some other thoughts we've had besides what you're looking at. So more like I guess what I'm saying is there are ways to kind of enhance that corner with maybe more like a rounded off edge that that would really kind of draw your eye to that focal point and kind of make that corner more prominent as opposed to trying to chamfer it off like we've drawn. And I'm just trying to understand how you would perceive that. That's really hard to answer that question without looking at something that shows it. But I'm trying to think of ways to make it look more like the gateway, but also break it up, you know. I think I've got some work to do, and it's really hard to speak in.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that. I
comments.
think, you know, if you all want to develop some massing concepts and, you know, then through a work session or another means, be very happy to keep the conversation going. You know, I know round forms here conjure the rotunda and other things, which are often pretty significant civic elements. So, you know, I think to the extent this is commercial, and to Fred's point about whether or not there's a real pedestrian entrance, it's definitely attention to sort of come up with something that marks the corner, but also doesn't signal incorrectly that it's where we're all headed and what it's all about.
Thank you.
Appreciate the challenge, and look forward to having a chance to continue the conversation once you've had a chance to develop some massing concepts for the site.
That's great. Thank you.
Great. Anything further before we move on?
I don't. Does anybody else on the developers group have anything else to add or mention? Nope. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah,
Thanks for hearing us and putting this review together.
Absolutely.
Thanks for
Margaret,
doing it so thoughtfully.
just to note for the record.
Dave, I can share the list of comments that we had in the staff report. Do you want to look at those quickly and see if those are all good to go? We'll go back after the fact and do some quick minutes to get more of the comments in, but you want to take a look at this list. Can you see the Word document now?
Yeah, those all still seem applicable to me. Chris, Fred, anything? It sounds like, Margaret, you'll add a few more comments about mass and scale and siting from the discussion.
Yes.
Yeah, okay, great. Well, thank you. Okay, our last item today is other business and approval of the minutes for August 16th. Let's see, is there a motion to approve those?
I'll move to approve the minutes.
Thank you, Chris. Is there a second?
I was absent for those, so I'd rather not second if I can, but maybe Frank can.
Frank, are you able? Yeah.
I'll second.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay, sorry, just getting my paperwork straight here. Okay, that is a motion for approval of the August 16th minutes. Mr. Hancock.
Aye.
Mr. Missile,
Aye.
Mr. Henningsen,
Aye.
and Mr. Vanderwerf.
Aye. Great. Well, let's see. So the next meeting is October 4th, 2021. It will be a virtual meeting again. The September 20th meeting has been canceled. There are no items for that agenda. So I hope everybody enjoys and appreciates the extra time that afternoon. We'll all be available for the 4th.
Yes.
Great. Super. Anything else before we adjourn this afternoon?
Thank you all.
Great. Thanks, everybody, for your time today. Next meeting will be October 4th, and we are adjourned at 2:25.
Thanks.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.